Dark Confidant, Tarmogoyf, and Bitter Blossom. These used to be format staples in the modern metagame, and now the only one that's fringe playable is Tarmogoyf. While many people have written off most mid-range decks without Wrenn and 6 in them, this is a green-black base deck that is absolutely amazing. As you can see, this deck looks like it's from 2016, with playing 4 copies of Inquisition and 4 copies of Thoughtseize alongside bulk rares like Witherbloom Command and Elvish Reclaimer. It just seems that this deck is quite underpowered. But the key card that's holding this up is Urza's Saga. And the reason why Urza's Saga is so great in this deck is it's all around finding it and putting it on the battlefield. The reason is because Elvish Reclaimer is a 1-mana 2/1 that says pay 2 tap, sacrifice a land, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This means that no matter what, we can always find our Urza's Saga. And if we're in a real pinch, we can find other lands like Golgari Rot Farm and Bojuka Bog. And in addition to Elvish Reclaimer, we're playing Witherbloom Command, which is a 2-mana sorcery that says choose 2. Target player mills 3 cards, then you return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. Destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with converted mana cost 2 or less. Target creature gets -3/-1 until end turn, and target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. The reason that Witherbloom Command is so powerful is it allows you to 1-for-1 with a Wrenn and 6 because it can kill a Wrenn and get back a land, meaning that this is one of the cleanest answers in the entire format to that card. And when talking about 1-for-1ing, the most efficient way to do that is with discard spells like Thoughtseize and Inquisition, which is why we're running 8 of them. And when taking a second glance at the deck, we're playing some weird ones like Bag of Holding, Haywire Might, Pithy Needle, Soul Guide Lantern, and 3 copies of Bitter Blossom in the sideboard. And while Bitter Blossom was once a banned card in the modern format, it has completely disappeared. But the reason we're playing this in the sideboard is the best counter in black to Murktide Regent. So we're going to be taking this deck through a League of Modern and seeing how busted these old cards are. Match 1, we're on the draw with a fine hand. Opponent plays turn 1 Arid Mesa. We find a Goyf off the top, so we're going to play Bobble and do the Bobble trick. Opponent plays out a Scalding Tarn. We look at our top card, see an Overgrown Tomb, and we don't want another land, so we'll shuffle that away. We draw Dark Confidant and another land. We'll play out Saga into Tarmogoyf. Opponent untaps Shocks and Steaments and plays out Teferi, and they bounce our Tarmogoyf. Ooh, and we draw Thoughtseize off the top. Great draw. We'll run out our Swamp and cast Thoughtseize. And Prismatic Command's by far the best card in the hand, so we're going to take that one. Run out another Tarmogoyf. Opponent untaps and ticks up Teferi. Plays out a Dwarven Mine and passes because of the Teferi tick up. We draw a Bag of Holding. We'll float a mana off a Saga, grab a Shadow Spear, play out a Dark Confidant, go to combat and try and take down this Teferi. In combat, they use a Prismatic Ending to take out the Goyf. So we're going to play Urborg into another Goyf here. Opponent plays out another Dwarven Mine, picks up Teferi, and plays a Wrenn and 6. And they kill our Dark Confidant. No! We draw a Fatal Push off the top, so we're going to equip the Shadow Spear to Tarmogoyf, attack down Teferi, and we'll play out land into a Bag of Holding. Wrenn and 6 on Arid Mesa, goes to combat, attacks us for 2, and passes. We draw an Overgrown Tomb, we'll just go to combat, attacking the opponent. They're down to 8, we'll play out a Dark Confidant, equip Shadow Spear to the Confidant so it can't get pinged by Wrenn and 6, and then Shock and an Overgrown Tomb, holding up push. Wow, and we end up stealing the game because of that well-timed Thoughtseize. Let's get on to sideboarding. We're going to take out 4 Fatal Push, a Bag of Holding and Bobble for Torok, Needle, and Engineered Explosives. Game 2, our start looks fine. Opponent goes turn 1 Arid Mesa. We'll play out our Bobble and Bobble trick ourselves. Top card is a Thirst. That's a decent answer to Wrenn, so we'll keep it. We cast out our Thoughtseize, and again, I think Prismatic Command is just the best card in the hand. Opponent plays out a Scalding Tarn. We untap, drawing a land. We'll play out Bobble and do the trick again. Top card is a Saga, and since they have Claim, this is not a good draw, so we'll shuffle that away. And we're not even going to play out the Reclaimer because we know about the Lightning Bolt. When we find another land, opponent plays a Scalding Tarn, and we find another land off the top. We'll play as Bloodstained Mire, fetch for Tomb, and grab Giganta. Opponent plays tap Stomping Ground. We find an Inquisition, so we'll fire that off. And Nature Claims is way better than Lightning Bolt, so we'll take the claim. Run out our Elvish Reclaimer and play a Verdant. And we might as well run out the EE for 0. On our end step, they play out Binding, taking out our EE, and they drew a Dwarven Mine for turn. Then they cast out another Binding, taking out our Elvish Reclaimer. We top deck a Thoughtseize, so we'll play out Forest and play our Giganta. And in response, they fetch out another Dwarven Mine token, and they drew another Dwarven Mine for turn. We top deck a Confidant, so we'll Thoughtseize them, getting rid of this Bolt. And in response, they bolt us. All they have left is a Mountain. We'll play out our Dark Confidant, play our land, and hold back Giganta as a blocker. On untaps and Prismatic Endings our Confidant. We top deck a Tarmogoyf, we'll play that out. Tack in for 5, and pass back. Opponent plays out a Wooded Foothills for turn. Not playing the Mountain we know about. We draw another Goyf, we'll attack in with both, and they chump block with 1. Going down to 8, we play out the Tarmogoyf, and we're going to use this Bloodchief's Thirst now to play around Veil of Summer. And they found another fetch land off the top. We find a Witherbloom of Command off the top. This is just lethal. We'll mill us and kill one of the dwarfs. And that's match number 1. Let's get into match number 2. Just a friendly reminder to leave a subscribe. It really helps me out, and it's free to do. Match 2, we're on the play with a great hand. We're going to shock an Overgrown Tomb and fire off an Inquisition. Seems like we're up against blue-white control here. So we're going to take this Prismatic Ending so that we can resolve our Confidants. Opponent plays a Floodstrand. We find a Fatal Push. Not great draw. We'll fetch out a Swamp and play a Confidant. Opponent untaps and fire ices our Dark Confidant, killing it. We draw Elvish Reclaimer, but we'll run out another Confidant. An opponent plays out a Teferi Time Raveler, bouncing our Confidant. We draw a Bloodchief's Thirst Return. We're going to go Thoughtseize, and Narset's the best card in the hand. Then play out our Elvish Reclaimer. They tick up Teferi and play out a Polluted Delta, casting Fire Ice, killing our Elvish Reclaimer. Find a land, we'll run that out. Play our Dark Confidant. They fetch up an island, counterspelling that. They play out Floodstrand and tick up Teferi. And on our upkeep, they play a Days Undoing, giving us a fresh 7, not sure why. And our 7's way better, so we'll Thoughtseize the opponent. And they counter that. We'll fetch Shock and play out a Dark Confidant into a Blooming Marsh. They down tick Teferi, bouncing back Confidant to the hand. Then they cast out another Teferi. They tick up and play land. Find another Witherbloom, we'll cast that, milling us and draining the opponent. We'll pick up this Nurturing Peat land, play it out, and play out a Dark Confidant. Opponent ticks up Teferi again. They play out a Narset, evoke out a Solitude, and in response to the evoke trigger, they cast a Days Undoing, which will end the turn and keep this around, and that's just game. Let's get on to sideboarding. We're going to take out 4 Push, 2 Thirst, and a Witherbloom Command for some Bitter Blossoms, Torok, Pithy Needle, and a Bajuka Bog. Game 2, our starter's a little weak, but I'm going to keep. We'll go turn 1 Blooming Marsh into a Springleaf Drum. Opponent plays Polluted Delta. We draw a Shadow Spear. We'll go Saga into a Dark Confidant and cast out our Shadow Spear. Opponent untaps, plays out a Hull, and then fires our Dark Confidant. We draw a Boseiju for turn. We'll play out Overgrown Tomb and just hold up Urza Saga activations. They play out a Misty, and we'll just activate Saga. Untap, drawing another Saga. We'll make another Construct. And off the Saga, we're going to grab Bag of Holding. We'll play out another Saga, attack in for 5. And opponent's down to 13. On our end step, they cast a Dress Down, so in response, we'll tap Construct and activate Bag. And we'll discard an Overgrown Tomb to the Bag of Holding. Opponent untaps and plays out a Teferi, bouncing their Dress Down back to hand. We top deck a Bauble. We'll run that out. And we will activate Saga, playing our Boseiju, and then cast a Witherbloom Command, taking up a Saga. Opponent ticks up Teferi, then cast an Narset, and they down tick, which failed to find. We draw a Boseiju for turn, and we will activate Saga in our upkeep, even though we know they have a Dress Down. And we'll grab Pithy Needle, naming Narset. And we go to combat, and in response, they cast a Dress Down, killing both of our constructs. We'll play out a Saga, and bauble them now. Opponent ticks up Teferi, plays the island we know about. On their end step, we'll use Boseiju to kill this Hall of the Storm Giants. And on our upkeep, they cast a Fire Ice, tapping down our Urza Saga. We top deck a Torok for turn. We'll play out our Reclaimer, and pass the turn holding up Bag of Holding. On our end step, they cast a Prismatic Ending, killing our Pithy Needle. Then fire our Elvish Reclaimer. They untap, down-ticking Narset, finding a Days Undoing, and that's going to do it for us. The opponent's just way too far ahead, so let's get into match number 3. For match 3, we're on the play. Hand looks fine. We'll shock an Overgrown Tomb and cast an Inquisition. Whoa, sweet hand from the opponent, but we'll take the Cookbook. Opponent plays out the Xander's Lounge. We draw a Reclaimer for turn. We'll play Verdant and the Reclaimer, holding up Push for the turn 2 Jace if they play it. Opponent untaps and Galvanic Blast our Elvish Reclaimer, then plays a tapped Watery Grave. We untap, drawing a Tarmogoyf, play that out, and hold up Push again. Opponent plays out an Otawara into a Jace, and we're gonna push on our upkeep to play around a Spell Pierce. So Fatal Push the Jace, cast a Thoughtseize, and we'll take the Jace here. Play out Nile Spellbomb and attack in for 5. Opponent untaps and plays out a Nile Spellbomb and immediately cracks it. And they pay a black to draw a card and do nothing else. And tap finding a Goyf. We're gonna play a little risky here and cast this Witherbloom Command. Gonna mill us and drain the opponent for 2. And we find an Urza Saga, play out Saga, attack in for 5, and then play another Goyf, presenting lethal next turn. And opponent scoops him up. Let's get into sideboarding. We're gonna take out 3 Inquisitions, 3 Baubles, and a Bag of Holding for 3 Haywire Might, Pithy Needle, Soul Guide Lantern, and a Bajuka Bog. For game 2, our hand's a little land heavy, so we got them all. And our 6 is quite good, has 3 lands essentially, and some great spells. Turn 1, opponent fetch Shocks and cast a Thoughtseize, and the opponent takes our Dark Confidant. And we draw a Confidant for turn, quite funny. We just go turn 1 Reclaimer. Opponent plays out an island into a Cookbook, into another Cookbook. We top deck a Saga, so we'll play that out into a Dark Confidant, and we'll send in for 1. And opponent does have a Daredevil. They activate both Cookbooks and get 2 foods. Opponent plays out a Bloodstained Mire and passes. We draw a Witherbloom for turn and a Verdant. We're going to play out our Verdant, fetch for a Swamp, and cast a Witherbloom Command, killing one of these Cookbooks. In response, they activate it, getting another food. And we mill over 2 lands, so we'll just grab another Verdant, and then we'll attack in for 3. And on the end step, they activate Cookbook and crack a food, going back up to 13. Opponent shocks in a Steam Vents, and then plays out a Daredevil. Our upkeep, Dark Confidant flips an Elvish Reclaimer. Then we draw a Thoughtseize, and I forgot to float a mana off Saga. But we're just going to pick up a Haywire Might here. We'll cast out another Witherbloom, killing the other cookbook, and milling us picking up a land. And opponent had another Daredevil in hand, and with Witherbloom, we will pick up the Saga and play that. And we'll send in with Reclaimer, and opponent does trade. Opponent untaps and just casts another Daredevil. Dark Confidant flips up a Seiju, and then we draw a land for turn. We're going to lead on Thoughtseize here, discarding the cookbook, great discard. Play a Verdant, fetch up a Forest, and then cast our Tarmogoyf and our Elvish Reclaimer. And no reason to attack here. Opponent drew a Thoughtcast, which costs 1 mana because of all the food tokens. Then they run out of Mistress Bauble, getting back a Daredevil. Then they play a Saga for turn, pretty sweet turn for the opponent. And they even cast the other Daredevil they picked up. Bob flips another Urza Saga. Then we find an EE, so we'll float a mana off of our Urza Saga, grabbing a Shadow Spear. We'll equip the Goyf with the Spear, attacking with Tarmogoyf. An opponent double blocks. They're down to 8. We'll play out this Urza Saga, then activate our Reclaimer, sacking the swamp, grabbing a Bajuka Bog. We exile their yard, and then activate Haywire, killing their Urza Saga. Opponent untaps and plays out an Urza. Good thing we have this EE though. And they spin an Urza and find an Asmo. Oh my god. That was a sick turn. And then they pick up an Underworld Cookbook and kill our Dark Confidant with Asmo. We untap and draw a Tarmogoyf. And we're going to attack them with Reclaimer. They're going to kill it anyways with Asmo, so might as well as try and get some damage. Hey yo, we get the 3 points. We'll play out an EE and pop it immediately. Yep, and there goes our Reclaimer. And we'll shock in a tomb and hold up Saga activation. Opponent plays out a land into a cookbook. Then they activate Urza, finding a Mistress Bauble. And on their end step, we activate Saga. We untap, finding a land. We'll activate Saga again. And off Saga, I guess we'll grab Pithing Needle. And we're going to name this Mistress Bauble. We'll attack in for 4, which is a forced chump block. Then we'll play out our Tarmogoyf into a tapped Overgrown Tomb. And opponent scoops him up. Let's get into match number 4. Match 4, we're on the play with a fine looking hand. We'll lead on Swamp into a Mistress Bauble. Opponent plays out a Bauble. And they did the Bauble trick, tracking in a Steam Vents. We'll Bauble them on their instep. Seen a Ragavan. We untap, finding a Reclaimer and an Inquisition. We'll fire off the Inquisition. And Express Variation is the best card in the hand, so we'll take that. And play out our Urborg. They play out a Spire Bluff and pass. And we find a Thoughtseize. So we'll play Swamp and fire that off. And they counter that. Then they play out a Ledger Shredder into a Ragavan, conniving away an island. And on their end step, we'll push the Shredder. We find another green card, so sad. We will Blood Chief's Thirst the Ragavan and play out our Dark Confidant. They bolt our Confidant and don't do anything. Find another green card? No. We'll just buy Gigantha and pass. They play out a Misty and pass. We find a land. Yes. We'll fetch Shock in a Tomb and play out a Tarmogoyf. And they spell snare that. An opponent does nothing. We find a land, so we'll slam our Gigantha. And Gigantha resolves. Opponent casts out a Shredder into an Unholy Heat, killing our Gigantha. And they connive away a land. We untap, find a Saga. Amazing draw. We just play out an Elvish Reclaimer. Opponent dashes out a Ragavan, attacking in, and we will trade. And nothing after that. We draw a Thoughtseize for turn. We'll fire that off, seeing a land, and we'll pass the opponent. They go straight to combat, hitting us for 1, then cast out a DRC. We'll activate Saga, untap, drawing a push, and we'll activate Saga, grabbing a Nile Spellbomb, casting down an Elvish Reclaimer, and we will attack in for 3. An opponent takes it. An opponent goes to combat, so we'll activate Spellbomb, exile on the yard, and drawing a card, finding a Witherbloom command, great draw. And then we'll double block the DRC here. An opponent has the Otawara, so the double block was good. And we'll push the Ledger Shredder before damage happens. We draw a Peat Land for turn, so let's cast a Witherbloom, milling us for 3 and draining them for 2. We'll grab a Saga, play that out, and opponent scoops them up. Get on to sideboarding. We're going to take out 2 Witherbloom commands, a Bag of Holding, Mistress Bauble, and 2 Inquisitions for Go for the Throat, Bitter Blossom, and a Bajuka Bog. Game 2, our hand looks great. Opponent leads on turn 1 Ragavan. Then we find another discard spell, so we got to play out a Reclaimer and hope that we can block. Opponent plays as a fetch, and we will 100% trade. And they just pass after that. We find a Goyf, so we're going to cast out an Inquisition. And Spyro is definitely the best card in the hand, so we'll take that. Opponent untaps and plays a Ledger Shredder. We find a Saga, we'll run that out, and then cast out our Dark Confidant. Opponent plays out a land into a Shredder, and an EE out on 0, conniving twice, discarding Murktide with the first, and then discards a Spell Snare with the other connive, and finds a Bolt for our Confidant. Acts in for 2. We find an Overgrown Tomb. We'll shock that in and cast both of our Tarmogoyfs. Opponent connives twice, gain rid of an Unholy Heat, and a Consider. Opponent plays out a Misty and attacks in for 6. We find a Confidant, we'll float a mana, grabbing Shadow Spear, and then we'll Thoughtseize. Opponent has a Dress Down into a Consider, and Steam Vents is in their hand. So we'll equip one of the Tarmogoyfs, attack in for 1. An opponent drew a land for turn, and they attack in for 6. We're down to 3. We'll just go to attacks. An opponent's down to 6. We'll play out Dark Confidant to block one of these Spyro tokens. And on the end step, they do make the 2/1/1s. Opponent untaps and goes to combat, attacking us for 6. Plays land and passes. Confidant flips a Thoughtseize, and a go for the throat for turn. We'll just go to combat and attack in. And no blocks from the opponent. We take down match number 4. Let's get into the 5th. Match number 5, we're on the draw, but with a fine hand. Opponent leads on a turn 1 Saga into an Amulet. We find a land for turn. We'll fetch Shock and play out Reclaimer. Opponent plays out another Amulet into a Castle Garenberg, then plays out an Explorer, and runs out of Sunhome. We untap, find an Inquisition, and it's either Inquisition or Witherbloom, and I think Witherbloom's better here. We'll mill us and destroy an Amulet, picking up a Bloodstained Mire, and attacking in for 1. Opponent floats mana, finding an Amulet, and they have a Simic Growth Chamber. Oh, we should have Inquisitioned. All right, we're gonna lose this one because the Amulet Titan player has 2 Amulet Vigors, so let's get into sideboarding. We're gonna take out 2 Bloodchief's Thirst, a Bauble, a Bag of Holding, and an Owl Spellbomb for 2 Turoks, 2 Gopher Throats, and a Haywire Might. For game 2, our hand's quite good. Turn 1, we're gonna fetch Shock and Thoughtseize, and we're gonna take the Amulet of Vigor here. Opponent runs out of turn 1 Saga. We find a Saga off the top, so we'll play that into a Haywire Might, killing their Saga. Opponent plays out a Forest into a Boreal Gracer, putting in a bounce land. We top deck another Saga, and we'll run that out. Opponent plays out a Forest into an Boreal Gracer, playing another bounce land, picking up their Forest. On their end step, we'll make a Construct. When we untap, drawing Springleaf Drum, we'll activate Saga again. We'll pick up a Shadow Spear, play out a Nurturing Peatland into a Springleaf Drum, and attack in for 4. An opponent just chumps blocks, and on our end step, they dismember one of our constructs. Opponent untaps and plays out a Dryad. We draw a Witherbloom command for turn. We will activate Saga. We'll pick up a Bauble and attack in for 5. An opponent chump blocks with the Grazer. We'll play Bloodstained Mire, fetch out a Swamp, and play our Dark Confidant. We're hoping to fade a land off of them. Opponent casts a Summoner's Pact. An opponent finds a Tireless Tracker, and then they play out a Teleria West, getting a clue. In our upkeep, Dark Confidant flips a Fatal Push. Then we draw an Inquisition as well. We're gonna crack Bauble, looking at their top card, seeing a Mycothan's Gardens. We'll Fatal Push the Tireless Tracker, then go for the Throat the Dryad, then attack in for 10. I think we're gonna get this one. On the end step, they do crack their clue as well. An opponent scoops them up. Let's get into match number 3. Game 3, our starter looks great. Opponent goes turn 1 Forest into an Amulet. We find a Reclaimer off the top. We'll play Blooming Marsh, Bauble, look at the opponent's top card, seeing a Castle Garenbrig, and then we will Inquisition them. And we will take the non-redundant card and an Amulet, and we find a Verdant off the top. Opponent plays a Teleria West and passes. We find another Witherbloom command, great draw. We'll fetch Shock and fire it off on the Amulet, and we'll pick up a Verdant from the yard. Opponent runs out of Castle and passes. We find a Besage for turn. We'll play Saga into a Reclaimer. Opponent runs out of Saga, and before it gets a counter, we'll just Besage it. Drawing a Dark Confidant. We'll play out a Verdant and fetch, getting our Reclaimer to a 3/4, and attacking for 3. Opponent plays out another Forest, and we're going to activate Saga. We get ourselves a 1/1, we untap, finding a Dark Confidant, we will activate Saga again, and we're going to pick up a Springleaf Drum off of the Saga, then play a Dark Confidant and attack in for 6. And opponent's down to 11. We have 11 on board with 2 removal spells for their 2 Boreal Grazers. Opponent plays out a Dryad into a Grazer, into another Grazer. We untap, Confidant flips an Inquisition, and then finding an Elvish Reclaimer. We're going to lead on and go for the Throat on the Dryad, then attack in for 9. An opponent chump blocks with the Grazer. We will Inquisition post-combat, seeing a Primeval Titan, and then play out a Reclaimer. Let's go! And opponents concedes. Easy 4-1. So obviously we got a 4-1. The deck was fantastic. This is definitely my pet deck. I love this deck, and whenever I go positive, I just can't help but smile. And the only loss we did lose to was a control deck, which is like a little bit more, it's not difficult, but their variant was definitely hard because they have this combo finish of Narset plus Days Undoing, where traditionally against other control decks, you kind of have time to set up, whereas against that deck specifically, we don't have much time, and it's a new deck, which is always harder to play against when you don't know how to, play against these control decks, especially when they have a new twist to them, and you have to be aggressive, and then you also have to be controlling. It's just like a very difficult, game 1's very hard against any control deck because we have, a bunch of dead cards, 4 Fatal Push, 2 Bloodchief's Thirst, and like holding, having these weird hands where you just don't do anything. But I hope you guys enjoyed the blast in the past with Dark Confidant, Tarmogoyf, and Bitter Blossom getting a 4-1 in the current modern metagame. Please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, really helps me out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.